Hello and welcome to my new updated hurricane season forecast for 2025. And actually a lot of the season has actually undergone, especially since my last video, which actually was 17 days ago. I think this is my longest gap since we were changing systems. But at the moment we do have some moisture over here just to the east of the Bahamas. Looks like that's going to continue to the west. We have some moisture over here in Mexico, maybe some tropical waves over here. But otherwise, we are relatively quiet. And I will mention that we have actually gotten kind of active in the last week or two, actually. We had Tiny Andrew out here, shouldn't have been named. We also had Tropical Storm Barry over here. If you see the satellite imagery on that, that did not look like a tropical storm either. And then there was Chantal, however you say it, over here to the Carolinas, caused some flooding, some gusty winds, and maybe just kind of disrupted some people's July 4th vacation. And the rest of the moisture from that is over here in the northeast and is going to quickly move off and offshore into the open ocean very soon. Now, I want to start out this forecast with just recent stuff because we've had a lot of activity, and I do want to cover what might be happening over the next little bit. So right here, we have the remnants of our Chantal moving out right here, and that is going to maybe create a little low pressure system. But otherwise, we're staying kind of inactive, although activity in the US kind of looks interesting. Maybe I'll cover that in a couple days or so. And we actually have a tropical wave that is going to move into the Caribbean. But what I do want to highlight here is that we do have an area here breaking down from our trough here and is kind of cutting it off and allowing it to produce some moisture over here along the Gulf Coast. And if this thing stays enough out to sea, enough rotation, enough warmth, it's actually quite warm up here. We could actually have a system somewhere over here in the northern Gulf. Another area to watch as well is as this system, we do have another lower trough here that could actually cause another cutoff low. But at the moment, I haven't really seen many models that are really picking up on it. We do have one right here is kind of picking up on maybe a low pressure system, but the GFS does go a little crazy and I think is a little too far out at the moment. Now, one of my favorite things to look at for hurricanes right now is Google's new Weather Lab Cyclones Preview. So my guess is that they'll release more in the future, but this is their cyclones portion, and this again is forecasting where Chantal is actually going to move out here, and this is where potential tracks that the model is picking up might go. This model has actually been well known to be good at doing tracks and stuff like that. And here it is, showing some systems popping up over here in the Gulf, and also some areas out here where this other cutoff might happen. So definitely two areas to watch over the next week or two. I doubt both would form, and I think our most likely would definitely be over here in the Gulf. Now, the NHC does have Chantal right over here in New Jersey, although a lot of the moisture is now further to the north and east. It is a post-tropical cyclone, and looks like they're no longer producing any forecasts as they go on with that. Otherwise, it's quite quiet right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they have like a 10% right now, if they put it up in the next couple of days over this area somewhere in here. In a similar area to where they had highlighted for Chantal, but further to the west, I believe. Now, forecasting out, one of the things I do want to mention here is the moisture amount. We have one model that is predicting something completely different and two models that are agreeing in a different solution. So this is our North American multi-ensemble or something like that, and this is predicting if we're going to have above average moisture in an area with the green or below average, such as this orangey area. And actually going out, we have July, August is one of our peak months, and September. and they all show below average activity, especially over here in the Caribbean. Now, that might actually change, but it still looks like we're gonna keep it kind of quiet and not super precipitationist according to this model run. But here is our different model. This is the CanSIPS model, and this one is showing something completely different. I don't really trust this one because it is predicting this kind of a July where we are kind of got some below average, some above average, but it actually racks up August, and it is definitely showing a different way. It is showing maybe a lot of Caribbean storms and maybe some big storms off of here, and then recurve off to the northeast, and less activity over here where our other two models are actually showing it. Here is our CFS model, climate forecast system. This is the monthly version, so we're going to be able to predict out the months as well. This is for our August 2025. It is showing, again, below average in most of the Caribbean. I do think we are going to see one banded area that is going to have above average precipitation, and around those it'll be above, below average, above and below, basically. And it looks like it keeps it through October especially, and the moisture only returns until after hurricane season is over in December. So that is one thing to watch as we continue on. Next up, I do want to show you some very interesting stuff that has been going on with our sea surface temperatures, especially in the Atlantic. But we do have a still neutral ENSO and still forecasted to stay in neutral ENSO through the rest of hurricane season. If it does go anywhere, it might be La Nina-ish, but it seems more like it is going to stay the neutral and not be just La Nina. And here you can see that we have actually been kind of warming up from our close to La Nina back in May, and now we are actually pretty much right at neutral. We are less than a tenth of a degree. We're about of maybe 600ths of a degree below average in general in our Nino 3.4 area, and our trend has been to slowly make our way closer to the neutral, and we'll see what happens after that. Also, these are our temperatures in the Atlantic. We're actually seeing some pretty anomalously warm areas in the Gulf over here. Not completely unheard of, but we do have like 31, 32 degrees over here, and we almost have unfavorable conditions over here. The green line is where we can see unfavorable conditions, and I think we are definitely above average over here, further north over here, and a contrast to here, there's like no favorability over here in the main development region. Last year we had Beryl at this time of year. That formed like right over here, right kind of really close to where now we actually have well below average waters compared to our super hot and warm year from last year, especially in the area that Beryl is in. Now, actually looking at that, we are seeing above average over here off the east coast of the US and portions of the Gulf and Northwest Caribbean. But a big chunk of this is actually below average main development region and to the north of the main development region. Hence why it's so far to the north over here and so far to the south over here. And we are also below average in the Caribbean. And if it does stay this way, it actually might be good news for our hurricane season. But the trends may say otherwise, so keep watching because there's some more interesting stuff to do with these pretty interesting sea surface temperature anomalies. Now, we actually had the first below average Atlantic in years. We were legitimately 0.2 degrees below average in the whole North Atlantic. Now we have just broken back to above average slightly, so we're pretty much near average right now in the Atlantic. Now, here's actually our sea surface temperature changes. Our biggest changes for warmer are actually in our main development area over here and Western Caribbean. So it seems like the main development area from like the here to here is generally warming up, and over here where it's kind of extra warm, except for this pocket over here, generally cooling down at the moment. Now, here's our central Atlantic sea surface temperatures. We're generally above average. And this is actually the East Tropical Atlantic, where I think is actually where a lot of these systems are coming off Africa. We are actually well below the average there. Our Caribbean has dropped from well above average to well below average, and our Gulf of Mexico has cooled decently since May 25th or so. And lastly, the most interesting one is that we've had a below average main development region for the last couple of months. And that is probably one of the most interesting things for this upcoming hurricane season. Even though we've already had 3 storms, I think the potential for our stronger storms, especially if these anomalies keep up, is going to be lower for the stronger storms and maybe have a lot more weak storms. Here are analogs based on current sea surface temperature anomalies. This year is 2000, and this is based on similar sea surface temperatures, basically above average over here, below average over here in the Pacific, and below average over here in the main development region. And this is what we got. We got 2 really powerful recurving storms, and we got a powerful storm named Keith over here that actually did a bunch of damage to Belize. But overall impacts to us in US, 0 hurricane landfalls. We only had 2 tropical storm landfalls, and they were both in Florida. I'm not sure if this one was in Florida or not. It looks like it was. A striking contrast compared to our previous, this is actually the year before, 1999, and we're seeing all sorts of intense storms. We actually have this storm over here, kind of like a surprise storm, really. It was not really that impactful, but this is major Category 4 Hurricane Brett, South Texas landfall. We also had Hurricane Floyd that took a path through the Bahamas and up the East Coast, as well as Lenny during November. Kind of a weird storm. It actually started over here in the Western Caribbean and moved directly east, which is definitely an odd movement for any sort of storm, especially in the Caribbean. A lot of our storms are just going straight west or straight west north and stuff like that. We did also have 2 recurving majors as well. Now, interestingly enough, we actually have a very interesting year here. This is actually 1975, and I find this one kind of interesting because we seem to have a lot of majors, but they're also in a lot of different spots. We actually have a major hurricane landfall panhandle of Florida over here, and we also have one over here, but we also have some recurving powerhouse storms. So kind of mixed bag. Our next one, not as good of a match, but we do have 2018 here. And of course, this is a pretty active year. We had powerful storms like Florence and Michael make impacts. But also we had a lot of activity that just kind of stayed out to sea. So I think this is going to be a general trend for the 2025 hurricane season. We're going to have probably plenty of storms, strong storms recurve, but there's also still a good chance we could have some pretty big impacts, especially in the Eastern Gulf or the East Coast. Now, here's another season where we actually did have 2 Caribbean major impacts, kind of different from what we're actually forecasting for 2025, but we also do have 2 powerful storms, again, recurving. I believe it's Aaron and Felix, I believe, and again, no hurricane landfalls, just like 2000. We have 3 tropical storm landfalls, and basically the only areas impacted are Cuba and Belize. Now, this is actually a map showing, compared to our analogs, exceptions of 2018 for some reason, but this is 1975, 1999, 2000, and 2001. We do have a pretty distinct above average strip right over here, and a bunch of areas that just kind of show potential recurves, but we also have an interesting above average area very western Caribbean over here into the Southwest Gulf. And we've actually had a storm over here already, so that's kind of verified actually. And again, along the East Coast, where we actually had Chantal as well. So things are verifying quite well so far. But in general, it is showing a more below average Caribbean, and maybe more of a northern more. If we have waves right directly off, they might form immediately and then move more to the north. Now, this is based on our NMME SST forecast in general for, I think, peak hurricane season, or the hurricane season in general. This is our top analog for that, and the year is 1970. We do have a couple major impacts over here in the Western Caribbean. We have a lot of weak storms out here, not a lot of strong recurves, a lot different from a lot of the other analogs we've seen. And we do have our Western Caribbean, not a lot over here in the Eastern Caribbean, which is what I think might actually end up happening. Now, actually, we do have 1975 again. This is our actually second analog for the NMME, so it actually shows up twice as an analog year. And this one is actually second, so more important. It does seem like we're going to have one or two big recurving storms, and then maybe a couple more powerful storms. Now, an interesting season to actually put here, this season was known for its storms that didn't really make a lot of impacts. We had Irene, and that's about it. We had Rena over here, and a couple storms in the Southwest Gulf, which kind of lines up with our analogs from earlier, and nothing really moving toward the U.S. in the Gulf. We had one tropical storm. Now, another interesting that they put up here is 2013. This is actually a great season because nothing actually happened, despite having a pretty active forecast. We had one U.S. landfall. It was a tropical storm. We only had 2 hurricanes, yet we did have a bunch of tropical storms. We had a bunch out here. We had a couple of Southwest Gulf, Eastern Caribbean, another one of those seasons. Now, our final analog year is actually very similar to 2011 and our analogs, where we have a lot of storms just recurving over here. In fact, we had 4 out of 5 of our majors actually recurving. We had Earl that made some impacts to the Caribbean and then East Coast Canada. Not super bad storm. We had Igor, which actually hit Bermuda, but especially up here into Canada. But Danielle and Fiona, Julia, sorry, not Fiona, along with, we also had Gaston out here as well. But really, the most interesting part is we have our only other major over here slamming into Mexico. And we have a bunch of storms over in here. Very anomalous. And only one storm over here in the eastern part of the Caribbean. Now, based on these anomalies, we are seeing a lot less near the U.S., although I think it could have one major landfall this year. Probably toward the eastern side of the Gulf is what I think, if the high pressure allows them to move to the north. If not, these storms are most likely going to form either here or over here and just move straight west. There were a lot of storms like that in our analogs, and we are seeing as well a pretty strong area out here, yet a lot of those storms aren't very impactful to our land. So that comes to my final forecast. What do I think we are actually going to have this year? I'm going to say we're going to have probably 14 to 16 storms, and we're going to have 6 to 8 hurricanes and 2 to 4 majors, which is about normal, but maybe slightly above average. But it also could be a bust and be below average because we are also forecasting a lot of dry air. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another regular weather forecast.